Billy Goat Mama podcast. I wasn't counting on that, so that's good. So for our first inaugural episode of Billy Goat Mama, I am welcoming to the show Allie Caminiti, and she's a multi-hyphenate. She is a lifelong runner. She's a new ultra runner. She's a mother of a 2-year-old. She's a running coach. She's an art therapist. And the list goes on and on and on. I'm sure you could add to it, and I'm sure you'll add to it during this conversation, because that's not all there is to you. But I'm really excited to talk to you because I feel like we've gone through very similar journeys over the last couple of years, and we've gone through very similar experiences. And I'd love to just hear about like your experience and how you've navigated some of the tough stuff.
Sure. If that we're talking about ultra running and being a mom, I kind of was thinking about this the other day, that there is no better training for ultra marathons than motherhood is. Because like, seriously, you could have a plan and it's just like a fart in the wind. Like it's gone. Like there's no, motherhood is like, whatever your idea is of what's going to happen, it will do the opposite. Like there's no, everything kind of just becomes like, as time goes by, like you can't pre-plan what you want to happen. So it really teaches you adaptability and flexibility and being able to improv and kind of just roll with things. Which is like the key, I think, in ultra running, because there's so much time, so many things can go wrong. And in running in general too, like you set a race strategy or race plan, or like even for just a workout, you set out what you expect to happen, and like everything could go awry. And you have to just be okay with it and like be able to accept and like keep moving forward. So that's kind of the biggest thing I think
that's been one of the hardest things for me is I'm such a planner. And so like when things don't go according to plan, like I'm really thrown off. And like I've had to learn to let that go. That's probably been one of the hardest things I've had to learn like over the last 4 years. Cause like my youngest is 4. Just learning to let go has been like, I'm kind of there yet, but it's like, it's still really hard. Especially in life. Just in life in general.
And when you're juggling multiple things at once, it becomes really difficult, and routine and planning is something that is very comforting and safe as long as things go according to like what you plan when you're holding like a job and being a parent and a partner and a runner and like trying to accomplish a lot. Being able to kind of like compartmentalize those things over the course of your day is very useful. And a lot of times things end up being multitasked, you know? And so like nothing kind of gets your full attention. And so I think, actually, I was thinking about this the other day too, that like sometimes being asked to like hold back at certain things actually provides a little bit more longevity. Like for instance, I have to, and especially immediately postpartum, I had to do a lot of runs with my stroller, with my daughter. And that was like the bulk of my easy running. And even some long runs ended up being with the stroller. And sometimes I'd end up having to like go grocery shopping with my kid while running, like literally running errands, like while with my child. And like, that was what my training was, you know? But like that has its advantages too, in like not only physically like the resistance of pushing a stroller, but also like you just have to get it done. You just have to get whatever it is done, and like everything can't be perfect. You can't overthink things. You just kind of like have to move through it. Yeah.
I think that's actually, you kind of touched on something that's actually helped my running. Like after becoming a mom, is that like, I don't have time at any other point during the day. Like, this is my hour window. I just got to do it. And whereas before, if I was like, oh, I don't feel like it, like, oh, I'll go in like half an hour. I just don't have that luxury anymore. It's like, okay, nope, this is my hour.
That anxiety is a luxury.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about overthink about things. And sometimes it's like, you just have to like jump because there's no room for hesitation with anything.
Yeah. That actually it helps me during my races though too, because like I fell, this actually reminded me of do you ever listen to the Rich Roll podcast?
I do.
I don't know if you, like he, like in his book, he like talks about how, he fell off his bike during a triathlon, and like everyone's kind of like, well, just get back on it. And like, that's kind of how I feel now in races. Like, whereas before, if like I fell and I hurt myself, I'd be like, you know what? That's okay. This is good for now. Now I'm just kind of like, I just got to get it done. Like, I just got to finish this. Because I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to sign up for this race again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to train for this race again. So it's just like, I just got to get it done. It's made this like, not urgency, but
this is a sense of urgency though. And it's almost urgency coupled with extreme presence. Like you have to be in the moment and not be taken away from that in any way. And I mean, that's being a mom too. Like as soon as you're distracted, and that's when something goes wrong,
totally
be on it. And you know what? Like, it's like you're falling off your bike over and over and over and over again, and you just keep getting back up. And after a little while, you're just kind of desensitized to falling. Like that's just part of it. Like, you just get back up.
No, totally. I had a recent race where I was like, my knees were all bloody. I think I told you about this. Mm-hmm. And I like stopping wasn't even like a question. It was just like, all right, let's see how this goes, and just bandage it back up, and like, this is going to be fun.
It's fine.
It's totally fine. Yeah. But I think it makes you a lot less like, overreactive too, to things.
Yeah. Like, that's a really good point. Like, you kind of respond instead of reacting. Like, there isn't time for that. There isn't, space or even really energy. Like, there's no excess energy for like kind of like frivolous feelings about stuff. Like, you have to be like all business. And then after you are able to rest, that's when all the feelings come out.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you can cry if you need to cry or scream. But like you mentioned it earlier, you were like, I don't have time to overthink it. I don't have that luxury anymore. I've just got to go. But like, I think it's actually made it like much, like, I don't know, it's made me better. I don't know, you have a course coming up, in like, well, I'll let you kind of describe it, because you're going to do a lot better than I'm going to describe it. But like, is that part of it? The just going?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So the course is on mental endurance. And it's primarily it's geared towards runners, but it could be for anybody. It feels very similar to, like any book or any podcast that you read or listen to, about like motivating yourself and drive and like moving through difficult things in order to like get the best out of yourself, and not only getting the best out of yourself, but living your life in like the fullest way possible. And how a lot of times we don't do that because of self-sabotage, and we don't even realize that we're sabotaging ourselves and rationalizing our behavior. And when you don't have time or energy or space to think about all that stuff, it makes you a lot more efficient in achieving your goals because it's just, you just have to do this. And yeah, so a lot about fear, self-belief, and making things a reality, self-sabotage, and like how we tend to like rationalize little quits along the way, and like really it's like our brains like sneak attack way of protecting us from putting ourselves in a situation that could be scary or like a psychological threat in some way, because it's hard and there's the potential for failure. So a lot about reframing failure too, and the way that you perceive failure. And like the first race that I did postpartum, my first ultra race, I DNF.
Which, by the way, how long was it? Can we just take a pause there?
Oh, it was 100K, and I know, right? I was like, sure, I'll just do 62 miles. Like, forget about the 50K. Let's just jump right to
go whoosh.
Psycho status. But yeah, like I wanted to do the absolute most difficult thing that I possibly could, and that I had already wanted to do Lake Sonoma 50 and was signed up for it the previous year. And then I was pregnant. And I mean, I thought I was going to run Tokyo pregnant at like 3 months pregnant. And then that got canceled. And then run Lake Sonoma possibly pregnant, like 5 months pregnant, a 50 miler. And there are a lot of people that would be able to do that. But this was something that I had never broached before. So doing that while pregnant, it didn't feel like a safe or like viable option for during my pregnancy. So I guess I deferred it to the next year or something, or like maybe I got my money back. I can't remember what I did. But like that race was still in my head as something that I wanted to do. But then I don't know, they came out with the 100K and I was like, I need to do this because this will be harder. Like it had
of course
the best possible thing that was still within my realm of possibility, but like would be very difficult to achieve. And I ended up DNFing. Leading up to that, I had a hip issue. I don't really even know what it was, but my hip was like really loose, my left side, and my left side was a lot weaker, which we later determined was like me psychologically or like unconsciously protecting my left side because I had some trauma to the left side during childbirth, and I was like, I can't use my left side. Like this hurts, so I'm not going to use it. And then even after I was healed, I just continued to kind of protect that side without awareness. And so it really like allowed quite a bit of atrophy to happen on the left side compared to my right side. So that hip was just not up to the challenge. And so I made a decision, like if I can do 20 or 25 miles during training, then I'll still do this race. And I was doing like 20, 25 mile long runs and back-to-back long runs. But I had never pushed the intensity to the level that I did during the race. And also I didn't have like the elevation change that I did during the race. Just like the constant up and down that Lake Sonoma is. And there was a point where I was like, my leg wasn't moving right. Like I was like, I'm going to get a femoral neck fracture if I keep running on this. And this is going to be really bad for my long-term running and health and like wellness. And I was devastated. But like also there was part of my thought process that was thinking about my athletes too, and like people that I know, and thinking if I DNF, are other people going to feel like they have permission to quit things because I did, you know? And regardless of the severity of the situation, like, am I giving people permission to quit on themselves by doing this? And that's, I mean, again, like, that's something that you think about as a mom too, all the time. Like, your behavior is permission for your child all constantly. Like, everything you do is an example for them. And so, like, being mindful and always like holding yourself to the standard that you want for your kids is like, that's in the back of your head with everything you do, you know,
all the time,
constantly. And like, and being a coach as well, like, I don't ever want to do something that is going to impact my athletes in a way that doesn't serve them, you know?
Yeah. And that's hard because you also have to do what you want to do for yourself. So like, you're constantly thinking of, it's a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of things to kind of like a confluence of responsibilities, because you have a responsibility to yourself, you have a responsibility to your children, and you feel a responsibility to your athletes.
Absolutely.
And to try to merge all of those things is also like probably a stressful piece, or or a hard balance to break is what I should probably say. It's a hard balance to strike.
For sure. It's a balancing act. I think that that word feels more appropriate than pressure. Cause it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like something, like, in a bad way. It feels like these are things that shape my decision-making in order to, like, also be the best version of myself, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, as we're talking about this more, this is like a common thread in my whole life, I'm realizing. Like,
cool.
My thesis in grad school was on identity maintenance. And when working with psychotic patients and people who oftentimes, and even like, if you think about psychosis in like certain like psychoanalytic framework, like you might think like neurosis and psychosis kind of like meet at some point. So like they kind of come full circle all the way around. So like those people that are on that extreme end of the spectrum or like loop don't recognize you. Like they don't, there's an inability to recognize the other in the person. So like we're talking and we have a recognition of one another as like humans, as individuals. And when you are in a space with somebody who's extremely psychotic, they do not have that recognition of you. You are just like this vessel to carry their stuff, you know? And sometimes you can identify with the projections that they're putting out there. And it's really important that when you exit that space, you're able to like put that stuff down and go back into being your own boat, you know, like your own captain of your ship. And sometimes that's how it feels or felt, I should say, like becoming a new mother, where like this child like isn't really being yet in a way. Like there's still this like very instinctual, like very almost like primal being. And even as a 2-year-old too, like still like super primal and like gets that I am a caretaker for her. And like, I know that she knows that I am going to support, like be there for her. But like in the beginning, it's really like this, you are just, you are a safe haven, but for survival for this child. And so like being able to maintain your own sense of identity outside of that and like remember who you are and like understand that there's more pieces to you than like this one slice of being a mother. And while that slice will inform the other slices, it's not the entire pie, you know?
Yeah.
And the same thing with like when working with very mentally ill people, like you have to remind yourself of who you are and be able to put other people's stuff down.
Yeah.
And not carry it with you all the time, because that would be like such an unbearable load. And I think that's kind of the balance too, with like being a mom and being a coach and like being a runner myself and like having my own goals and ambitions, is like being able to sometimes pick things up for other people, but then also put them down and focus on me and be able to maintain the aspects of my identity that make me who I am and not lose those. But it is like a juggling act, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's something I've struggled with now with like 2 kids, is like the demand for time, because, you know, you are their caretaker. They rely on you to survive. And then demand for your time is enormous. And so it gets smaller and smaller, like the amount of time that you have left over for yourself, and you have left over to kind of remember the things that like are you and like are integral to your, but it's also so important to try to find little holes in your day to actually, you know, perform those things, or you know, if it's reading a book, or if it's going for a run, or anything like that. It's like so important to try to maintain parts of yourself, so that you don't just become this like vessel of care for your children. Yeah.
Like an empty vessel to be filled by others. Like you have to fill it yourself too, you know?
Yeah.
And I think part of what makes that difficult as a new mom as well is the isolation and lack of interaction with anyone besides this small baby that just needs stuff from you. And don't get me wrong, like being a mom is awesome. It's like it's so cool all the time, but there's something also a conflict that I have where it's like, yeah, I'm a mom, but I'm also all these other things. And like, it's almost like boring in a way. Like, I don't want to say that in like being a mom is boring, but it's like, I feel less interesting as a person when I don't have all the aspects of myself that I know define me. And that when those things feel more hidden, you know, like to the world, like I want to be seen by the world and like society and the people around me as a whole person and not one aspect.
Yeah. I think it's also important that our kids see us as whole people though too, because like that's going to inform how they treat us. It's going to inform how they interact with us. And so like it's to their benefit that we retain a lot of this stuff, that we retain like what makes us us. And it's really easy to lose that. I've definitely found myself, I went through a kind of a really hard time, because after we had our first child, right before the pandemic started, we moved down to Southern California, and all of a sudden, like my trail community was gone. Like everyone I knew was gone, and it was trying to like reestablish myself and figure out who I was when all of the external pieces were removed from me, and all I had was this like little child that I had to take care of. And that was like particularly hard and particularly isolating, because all of a sudden, my communities were gone. And so it can be very, very isolating. But if you like find these like little pieces of time where you can grab your things back, grab your like interests back, I think it really, really helps. And if it doesn't exist, create it. Because that's one thing I'm trying. Right? We're trying. I'm really trying.
You too. I know that your goal is to create this space where people can share their stories, and in an effort to like bridge the gap between other people that might have felt like similarly to the way you have felt in this new space. And but it's also a space for you to share your story too, and like have this mirror. And I think that's what we lose when we're so isolated, like especially with the pandemic, like with so many people being alone. Like there's something necessary about in-person interaction that allows like the mirror and like to see yourself and others to be really reflected, for that to be accessible. And like we can do this on the computer like all the time, and like however many Zoom calls everybody has had, but like it's not fully that connection, you know? And so when all those pieces get taken away, like you said, like you moved, and your community was gone, your running community, your friends, like everything was new. There really is like this lack of reflection of who you are from the, like container of people around you, you know? And like, that is a huge aspect of how we maintain ourselves, is like by the people that we surround ourselves with, and like the spaces that we surround ourselves with. And sometimes if there's no other people, like you go on a trail run, you're like reminded of who you are, in this space. It's like you are reflected in everything around you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so critical. How did you, because I know you took a really long road trip like throughout the US before you came back to SF. How did you maintain like those connections, and how did you feel like not so isolated while you were like running around the country with a 1-year-old?
That is a really good question. So we road tripped. We sold our house in Sacramento, and then road tripped for like from September through like the beginning of March, and with a 1-year-old and our dog, who is next to me right now. And we stayed at like Airbnbs in different cities and kind of roamed around. And sometimes we would stay either in cities where we knew people and would make it a point to get together with those people, or we'd stay with friends in other places. And like those times were absolutely critical, because like being transient for that period of time and being in new places and not knowing anybody, and also like trying to get your bearings like in each new place was isolating at times. And like in the beginning it was really exciting, and like that filled most of the space. And then towards the end of it, I was like getting tired, and I didn't realize that I would feel that way. Like I really thought, I was like, I could do this forever. Like this is just like awesome and so adventurous and like great. And then I was like, whoa, I need like a little more grounding than this. This is not something that is sustainable for me for longer than this duration of time right now. Maybe if we had stayed in places longer, that would be different. But like the most time that we spent in places was like 2 weeks at a time. Most places
we'll edit that out. Hopefully, if I figure out how to edit, that will be great. But I mean, like, go ahead. You didn't have your nest.
Like, you didn't
you didn't have like a nest, like a community. Yeah.
And Rue was one, so she's like learning new words like every day. And he didn't say the word home until we moved to San Francisco. And like she said home and pointed like to the building we live in. And I was like, wow, that is really profound, that like she kind of understood on some level that all these other places were not our home. And like home is something that's like a little more stable and not necessarily like the place that you live, but like it's like where everything's calm and like you know what I mean, like a place that's consistent.
Totally. I don't know if like, have you seen the movie Encanto?
Yes. Love it.
Okay. Obviously. How dare I ask that question?
So good.
I had a very similar experience in that, and it's so weird how like our kids can really just drive something home that we've been feeling, but we can't really articulate it. But my son became obsessed with the one of the very last scenes where all of the town comes and helps them rebuild the house.
Oh, yeah.
And like the grandmother's like, oh, what's that sound? And I think I forgot the character's name, but he's like, it's everyone in town. And my son, every time we put on Encanto, wanted to fast forward. Oh, Antonio was the one he's the little boy in the movie. Yeah, okay. Antonio, he's like, I think it's everyone in town. And my son always wanted to fast forward to that part of the movie. And I was like, that's like really cool, but it's just sad that like he doesn't feel like we have like this like community like holding, because it was, you know, during the pandemic and we hadn't really started having birthday parties again, and we hadn't really like started having like neighborhood barbecues again, and you know, we had moved down here, so we, you know, lost a lot of our community. And like it was that period that I started thinking about how like we need community and we need to figure out how to build it back up. Because like my kids need it. And he recognizes that it's something that people should have. And we don't have it right now. It's like, it's wild. The teachers that like our little kids become for us. And they're like, if we listen to them,
truthful. And like, even if they're like, that's like quite metaphoric, right? Like through the movie, but like when you pay attention, like what you're saying, if you're listening to what they're actually saying, it's like so profound. And like things that we protect ourselves from thinking and feeling, they just like, cut right through it, you know?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it hits you really hard. It's something that I really appreciate. And I don't know as adults, like how we got to the point where we kind of just like let it go, and like we just let it go and let it go and let it go. And we don't actually like cut through it. Like we don't actually say like, oh, this is exactly what needs to happen, or this is exactly what's wrong right now. Or like, we're not meant to operate this way. But like kids are just like, no, this is how you're supposed to be as a human. And so you better get on it. Yeah. But yeah, it's amazing. They're little teachers. And yeah, so like, I'm so grateful because that's kind of where this whole like journey started, is like, he's right. We need community around us. So that has to be like priority for us, priority number one. And I know like some of it wasn't possible, but because of the pandemic and stuff, but yeah, we need to start working on it again, all over. Yeah. So have you started, like, how do you feel now that you're settled in SF?
I feel, honestly, it was supposed to start preschool on Friday when she turned 2, and then she got sick. And I was like, I had these big plans. I was like, oh, I got so many phone calls on Monday, like boom, boom, boom. We're going to bang all this work out. And then she was sick, and I was like, whoa, how am I going to do anything? Luckily she's at school today. And she's feeling a lot better. So that's good. And yeah, I mean, it's really nice to be here, and I feel incredibly lucky that I can like look outside and like be looking at the freaking Pacific Ocean, and it's so cool. But I think we're still in that building process of community as well. And the running community is honestly both in Sacramento and here. Like that is where I formed my friendships, or through where I formed my friendships. And, I think it's like definitely going to be pretty similar of a journey, building relationships with people through the running community. And part of me is like, I got no time for new friends, but like also like I need new friends, you know, like that's exactly what you just said. Like community is so integral to like our like existence. And like, the more, at least I feel, the more I stay to myself, which was very true on the road trip as well, the almost like the less self-aware I become. Like, I need to interact with other people in order to like see myself and like see my behavior and like see who I am and like, why am I having this thought? But when you're by yourself all the time, it's like, who am I? And like, what am I doing? You know? So I'm very grateful for the running community in that regard, that like, these are, and I mean, when you run with other people too, you're talking the entire time, and like, you really get to tell stories and hear stories and forge bonds a little bit faster than you would if you're just like playing with your kids at the playground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I was like, that's one thing I always tell people is like, oh, you know, if you really want to like know someone's life story, go on a trail run with them, because by the end of the trail run, you're going to know like the heartbreak they had when they were 14, and you're going to know the wrong career path they took when they were 22. And it's just going to be a fabulous, like, the best conversations I've had in my life have always been on like either trail races or trail running. For sure. There's something about being out there and like relying on each other. Especially if something goes wrong, like that person, you know, that person has your back. And you know, that person will stop for you and help you and get you help.
Totally.
And so it's like
when you share traumas with somebody, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, you're like, okay, now we're bonded. Like, I shared you, and like, you shared this with me. And like, when you're on a trail run, it's like, there some scary things can happen, or like you can fall, or like whatever. You're like exchanging like bits of yourself, and it's like, now we're connected, you know? Even if you don't say a word, like during a trail race or something, but you're like just supporting each other, like there's something being recorded between you in like that time shared. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, totally. No, for sure. It's like, what's the movie? I always relate everything to movies for some reason. Avatar, how they like can like their hair, they like connect with trees, and they can like talk that way. And I'm just like, that's kind of how trail running is. Like, you're all running, and there are these like kind of like, I might be getting a little weird here now, but like, there's these communications that you are sending to other people, whether you realize it or not. And it's like really cool. It's just like a really cool like vibe. Like, I don't know how else to like describe it, but like that's kind of what's attracted me and really kept me in it too. Is that like, I still like running on the road. But like, my trail races are probably some of the most fun moments I've had, for sure.
They like, there's a communal aspect to it that sometimes is more difficult to achieve on the road. Maybe because on the road, it's like very like individual, not that trail running isn't also an individual race, but like there's something about when you have this like product goal or like result goal that prevents you from being as like open to like the stuff along the way. And in trail running, it's like there's so much stuff along the way, like you cannot be closed off from that. You have to be able to like receive and like let things kind of like flow through you. And then there's that like aspect where you're talking about, like where there's this energy that's very like the word like translucent is coming to mind. Like everything just like flows through you. And I think that's also a big reason why we emphasize so much like being process oriented versus being, I mean, like it's important to have goals, and like I'm a very goal directed person, but also like being extremely process oriented, and like that is more like held on like a higher level like psychologically for me than the end result. And I think that's also like why postpartum training for something is so critical, because like you're reestablishing routine, effort, commitment to something that is important to you on a consistent basis. And it's not about the race. It's about like reestablishing yourself in a way that like, makes sense to you and feels like home, you know?
Yeah, no, totally. It was after I had my kids that process became like the focus for me of like, I just want a strong body. I don't want it to be injured. I want it to be able to do what I want it, like what I want to be able to do. And like, if I can run a mile as fast as I used to, great. But like right now, my focus is on just like being like a healthy, whole human being and like enjoying the process and enjoying being outside and kind of being grateful for it, that I can even do it in the first place. Because there's so many injuries and things like that. Like you're talking about your hip. And like I had a very similar thing that I went to see a PT for. And like there's so many injuries that can happen and you have to work through them. And so like just being grateful that I can even still do this on a regular basis has been, like that's been my main focus, I would say, since like having kids. Yeah.
That's something for you too that you remember when you told me you're like, just BT jumps, I did something you probably wouldn't approve. Oh yeah. Like, what? Did you run the 50K instead of the 25? 25 was like a stretch, like, you know. And you're like, fuck it, I'm doing it. Like,
I was just like, I'm probably gonna
the need to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there is sometimes like a mental need to do something that is more pressing than like the correct buildup for something.
Yeah.
And like for your sense of self, that's more important. And like you also didn't have any looming injuries. Like you were intact physically. So it wasn't like you were going to be not like running for a little bit after that, but like but because of soreness and exhaustion,
not because of injury. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was fun. That was like, I swore too. Well, like when I got, cause it was 2 loops of 25K and like I got to the end of the first loop, and they had a chair for me to nurse my 10-month-old. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, my husband's going to see my bloody knees and he's going to tell me to stop and he's not going to let me go. And he did the opposite. He was like, I don't know if he knew I needed to do it or if he knew that like I really needed to like kind of get through this on my own, but he saw my bandaged bloody knees and like they were bleeding through the bandages. And he just like, and he ran me like off, like as like, after I finished nursing, he just like ran me onto the next part of the loop. And he was like, yep, I'll see you in a little bit. It'll be good. And I was just like, I needed that. Yes. And I'm like, so glad that he didn't try to stop me. But like, I think he also saw that like, I still had enough energy. Like I wasn't like, I was still able to keep food in. I was still hydrating.
It was within reason. It was like crazy within reason.
You know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Those people around you were just like, this is pretty wild, but like, let's do it. Like, I support you, you know? I think that goes back to, needing the people around you to kind of reflect what it is that you need to, and like, to reassure you through their actions that this is okay. Like you can do this and, and they're there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like even like I want to have conversations with people that are just like, you know, pacers and like people that just support like mother runners, like people that help get more moms across that finish line, or, you know, the percentage of like women entries into a race, help get that up. And like, because there's so many people that are they aren't necessarily moms, but they are like, their mission is to like lift people up, which that's amazing. And like, we couldn't do it without them too.
Totally. Yeah. And it's still like, these are very maternal traits of like, people who are helping other people. Like, and that's something huge too. Like in terms of maintaining your sense of identity, helping professionals and like nurses, social workers, teachers, moms, like anyone who who their role is to support others, like they also need that space to remind themselves of who they are. And so hearing from them and giving them that space is really, I think, necessary for them and for the world to see like that these are people beyond like this one scope, Yeah.
No, absolutely. Awesome. Well, you're my first guest, so thank you for taking a chance on me. Is there anything else you want to like put out there? Your website, stuff like that.
If anybody's looking for a running coach, so I'll do individual run coaching, then the mental endurance course, which starts the first week of October. There's a couple spots still open. Or also if you just need like a personalized training plan to be built for yourself, you can head over to my website. It's mindrunnercoaching.com. And I'd love to work with anyone who thinks it would be a good fit.
Cool. I'll put that in the show notes as well, for afterwards. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know everything is super busy and your week was kind of like turned upside down. So I appreciate it. But yeah, thank you so much. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Bye, Allie.
Bye.